Defeat for Newcastle United against Brighton and Hove Albion at St James's Park on Sunday has put them out of the FA Cup before the quarter-final stage. It was a really disappointing performance and disappointing result. In this video, immediately after full-time, I'm going to be getting straight into where I think it went wrong and how Newcastle United react from here, with the big blow that Anthony Gordon will not be playing in the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool because he was sent off. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, welcome back to another video. In a slight change of schedule, I am not recording this on a Monday, I'm recording this immediately after full time on Sunday afternoon just to get that little bit more of a reactive flavour to it. Please continue to like, share and subscribe to the videos on the channel, continuing to push towards 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season. Hit like on this video and also get in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about Newcastle's defeat today. How do they react and where did they go wrong? And that's where we'll start today. I think Newcastle have a lot to pick up after that. Obviously the big elephant in the room between now and Wembley will be Anthony Gordon not playing against his boyhood club because of that red card, and it was a definite red card. It won't be overturned, VAR couldn't help, and it's in the unlikely event that an appeal is lodged. I think there's a possibility with that sort of level that it could be a frivolous appeal and it could actually extend the ban. More likely, for me at least, than anything else. So really poor from Gordon to do that, and it's put another unwanted narrative on the cup final because 2 years ago obviously it was Nick Pope was sent off against Liverpool before the Manchester United game, and there was all that talk about Loris Karius going in goal because Martin Dubravka couldn't play. There's going to be lots of it. It's not quite as bad as that because Harvey Barnes can come in and there's a strong player there. He's a good player, but he's not as important to the team, not just in terms of quality but importance to the team and what he brings. Gordon is so vital when Newcastle play well. I've said so many times Newcastle need their best players to play well when they do, and to take one out of the game straight away this far in advance and to know you're not going to have him is such a big blow. So actually the biggest repercussion from today, even though they're out of another cup competition, they were the only team left in England who could have won the cup double this season. Actually, I think the biggest problem that's been laid at Eddie Howe's door is the fact that he will not have one of his best players for that crucial game at Wembley, which we all know could be era defining and sort of generational. It's a real crossroads for Newcastle's project, really. So the fact that Gordon's not going to be there is a real issue, and that's a long-lasting scar from today, but it isn't the only talking point. Newcastle took the lead with a penalty in the first half from Alexander Isak. They had 2 goals disallowed for offside, a phenomenal second Isak strike in the first half, which would have put them 2-0 up. And when Newcastle get going at St James's Park, that has so often been an unassailable lead, but it was correctly offside. And then obviously after Yankuba Minter equalised via Kieran Trippier deflection before half time, Fabian Schär thought he'd won it in stoppage time at the second half, but he was offside. Yeah, a really, really poor way to lose it though overall, because Newcastle missed chances. They didn't really create enough, I thought, overall, but they did miss some chances. And obviously whenever the ball was turned over in midfield, even though Tonali I thought played well, he was bypassed a couple of times, and whenever that happened you had Jorginho Ruta in that space in between the lines, and you had the pace and power of João Pedro, Karo Matoma and Yankuba Minter ahead of him, and that was always going to cause problems against Newcastle's slow defence. There are fundamental issues that are only really fixed with recruitment, and Newcastle haven't recruited. It is repetitive, but this is why the PSR discussion and those recruitment discussions are always going to be in every analysis of every defeat. I think I've said this previously. They will be mentioned because unfortunately lots of these issues have been laid bare for a long time. The up front and the lack of depth, and the on the right hand side and in defence, they've all been laid bare because Newcastle haven't been able to fully strengthen their squad in the last 3 windows. So that lack of pace was exposed. But really, I think it was the drop off from the moment that Minter equalised, or the goal went in, whether it was a Minter equaliser or an own goal. I think is debatable because the deflection was pretty huge. It was on target, but I would argue that Dubravka probably saved it without the intervention of Trippier. But once that goal goes in, Newcastle's heads drop and they can't get back into the game. It's a fundamental issue and a familiar story for Newcastle, unable to answer problems on the pitch, regain momentum. Once the momentum goes, their very machine-like, very repetitive way of playing gets caught out. Brighton really took that momentum in the other direction, really went on to dominate the game. I think they were the better team in the second half, and then when the goal came from Welbeck, it's poor from Dubravka with his distribution, and that's where he's got a lot of credit. And lots of people have been anti-Nick Pope in the last couple of weeks, have said, well, Newcastle have Dubravka's distribution has been better, but there were a few times today where I thought Newcastle were under pressure because of the way they were playing with the ball out from the back, and then there was a lot of panicky clearances from Byrne, from Dubravka. That all stemmed from that sort of inability, I think, to really be comfortable with that at the level it was required, and ultimately that was cost. It was a great finish from Welbeck, deja vu. He scored the winner back in October at St James's Park. It's the second win on Tyneside for Brighton this season, and I think they deserved it ultimately. I think because the way that Newcastle again surrendered that momentum. So the starting 11 was a strong enough team, and you would have expected the midfield to get onto the game because Tonali was in the midfield, and obviously Isak coming back, being fit enough to play, and he really made an impact in that, particularly that first half. I thought Joe Linton was brilliant on his return as well. I've been very critical of him in terms of possession and in terms of the game being turned over and him losing it and not being good on the ball. But actually I thought he kept it simple, give and go when he had it, and then he put himself about against Carlos Baleba and really gave Newcastle that early foothold in the game. It only dwindled as the game went on because Newcastle couldn't maintain that momentum, and I think there was good movement, good link-up play. I thought Harvey Barnes was okay on one side with Gordon. That wasn't a problem. Barnes will most likely be on that left-hand side against Liverpool now, obviously, which ultimately isn't the end of the world. I think lots of people will be down about it. Lots of people will say that's ended Newcastle's chances of winning this trophy. But as I said earlier, it isn't the same level as Pope and Dubravka not being in there and Karius being in goal, and the sort of lack of knowing what Karius was capable of. It was his first competitive game for Newcastle, first competitive game since that Champions League final when it all unravelled for him. Whereas Barnes, yes, he isn't as consistent as Gordon, yes, he isn't as influential as Gordon, but he has quality, has shown at times that he is good enough, and he's definitely a player worthy of that shirt when Gordon isn't there, and this is a chance for him to step up. It isn't the end of the world, I think, especially if Isak's up front and fit enough to go, and Bruno and Tonali are in midfield. Newcastle still do have a chance with Barnes on that left-hand side, but there are a lot of questions to answer, I think, in terms of Newcastle reacting within the game and getting themselves back into it. If there are moments when they're on the back foot, I thought that's when it really didn't. They came out laborious in the second half and they regressed. And a big issue I have with Newcastle's defensive structure is there's lots of ways in terms of getting players forward and on the break and getting players back in numbers to defend. They're very good at that. They're extremely good at having 6, 7, 8 players back in numbers when the other team is attacking, but they never put any pressure on the ball. They always have numbers going forward and numbers back. But when you don't put any pressure on the ball in defence and you don't put any pressure on the opposition, it means that Newcastle can't build momentum. I think that's fundamentally when Newcastle struggle to gain that momentum back, because they don't force the other team into pressure when they themselves are under attack. And I think ultimately that was where 2 goals came from against Liverpool on Wednesday. The fact that Newcastle had numbers back, but there was no pressure on the ball. Liverpool found the net quite easily, and again today there is evidence with the goals that the lack of pace at the back cost them with that first goal, obviously, and Minter being caught on the counter. Brighton are very dangerous when the other team is attacking. We know that, but Newcastle should have had that ability to mitigate that, because they do have numbers back. They do have they do get back in good numbers, but they never put the ball under pressure, so they can't then relieve it and keep the ball and then reduce the temperature of the game for a minute and then build it in their own way and build their own attacks and build their own momentum. That's where I think fundamentally Newcastle struggled today, and that's one of the reasons why Newcastle don't manage games particularly well, because they don't manage individual situations quite very well. I think we've seen Brighton today have a number of different opportunities where there was 2 or 3 players combining with, and the ball kept coming back to Brighton, and then the pressure would rebuild, and Newcastle were unable to put their stamp back on the game. Brighton really, what they managed to do better than Newcastle did was one, take their chances, but also that little bit more structure in the midfield. I think Baleba was good for them, and Welbeck coming off the bench made a difference. Newcastle's substitutions, we know Eddie Howe does the same thing. It doesn't really offer much inspiration. A lot of the things that we saw today are not new, and they come down to structural issues that, as I say, you can't go a video really without talking about Newcastle's recruitment and Newcastle's inability and squad depth, because once 2 or 3 players aren't playing well and don't have the say on the game. I did think Bruno came off the bench, and I think it was right that he got a rest, but he came off the bench and did fairly well. But ultimately, this game was lost because Newcastle went into their shell, didn't put enough pressure on Brighton in that second half, and gradually lost control of the game. They were unlucky with Cher's offside call at the end, which obviously would have sent them through. There's one fine margin, and obviously the Anthony Gordon red card didn't help them either. But Brighton, really, they were the ones who were making the most of the second half and extra time, and ultimately deserved the victory. It's a huge missed opportunity with the FA Cup opening up so much for every team at the moment. Newcastle were 1 game away from Wembley if they got through today. They didn't do that. They now have to dust themselves down to West Ham in the league next week, which is just as important to keep the Champions League hopes alive. The season is far from over. The Champions League is still very much in sight, especially if they can go and bounce back with a win at West Ham. But then obviously that big game, which has just got that bit harder without Anthony Gordon. But I don't think this is the end for Newcastle's hopes of winning at Wembley. I think Harvey Barnes can do a good job, and there are enough reasons to be positive, as I said, from Wednesday, in terms of how Newcastle can attack Liverpool. If you haven't checked that video out, go and do so. But I'll be back next week with another video. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe, as I say, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.